Okay, good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome to today's webinar. This is the second episode in the Hussle webinar series that started this year, and we're planning to run these once a month, so covering a full variety of health and wellbeing topics and exploring their links to the employee fitness benefit space, which is what we specialise in here at Hussle. So I noticed that a few attendees today also attended our last session. So that was the Bringing the Benefits of Fitness to Work webinar last month. So welcome back. It's good to see some of you here today. So just a quick introduction then around what you can expect from today's session. So we'll first be introducing the topic of nutrition with a quick review of the major food groups. Then we'll examine what is quite a fascinating bit of science around how our diet can impact our brains and the way that that makes us feel. So obviously being an employee fitness benefits provider, we'll take a look at how we can adjust our diet to help support with our fitness goals. And then after that, we'll be speaking with Andrea, who is a nutritional therapist and neurolinguistic programming master coach at 3D Leisure, one of Hussle's fitness partners. After this, we'll be exploring a little bit more about what we do here at Hussle and how that can benefit your organisation. So firstly, for the benefit of those attending one of our webinars for the first time, a quick introduction to Hussle and how the business has grown and developed over the years. So the idea for the company was sort of first sparked when our co-founders, Jamie and Neil, who were colleagues at the time, were training for a charity swim to the Isle of Wight. This was obviously quite a challenge alongside their corporate jobs. And they wanted to be able to use different gyms, different pools, without having to go through the process of registering and having an induction each time. So this sparked the idea for the company, and they got to work on building the business. So the company launched originally as Pay As You Gym in 2011. Since then, it has rebranded to Hussle, becoming quite a household name in the fitness space. Went as far as launching our biggest ever TV campaign shortly before the COVID pandemic. As you'll expect, being a gym company, COVID was quite a tough time for us, but since then, sort of very much grown and thriving again. So now, as the UK's biggest fitness marketplace, so we provide members with access to over 1,500 gyms, pools, and spas across the UK. Throughout our history, we've offered these passes to individuals, so day passes to gyms, also monthly passes that allow entry to lots of different venues. And over more recent years, we've begun to move into the employee benefit space, so partnering with companies who want to offer their employees fitness as a benefit. So a quick introduction to me. So for the benefit of those on their first session today, so I'm B2B marketing manager at Hussle, so focusing on the corporate side. I've now spent around 5 years within B2B marketing roles. A lot of this time has been spent marketing to the HR profession. So I used to work within the conflict resolution sector. Prior to this, I studied psychology at the University of Manchester. I've also completed a mini MBA in marketing to support with my career progression. And in my time in sort of workplace conflict resolution, I also trained as a mediator, which might be relevant to some of the HR professionals in the audience today. So always been interested in sport myself, so this made the role at Hussle very attractive to me. On this slide, you'll see what my two proudest sporting achievements. So at the top, I'm receiving cricket coaching from a former South African international, and I spent some time at a cricket academy with him. Below this, you'll see my London Marathon jersey. So I successfully completed this back in 2019. So very much someone who relies on fitness for fun, relaxation, and also to stay healthy. So can't advocate enough for the benefits that staying active can have within our working lives and beyond. So moving on to sort of the main topic today, so nutrition. So thinking about a balanced diet and why it is important. So in the most simple terms, it helps us maintain a healthy weight and reduce the risk of chronic diseases, so such as heart disease, diabetes, and other conditions. So our nutrients fall into two main categories. So we have macronutrients and micronutrients. So macronutrients are very much the bulk of what we eat. So these are fats, proteins, carbohydrates, which provide us with the fuel to go about our daily lives. Micronutrients, they are vitamins and minerals, which we consume in much smaller quantities. And generally, we consume these together. So a lot of proteins will contain iron, calcium, vitamin D. Carbohydrates, such as fruits and vegetables, also contain lots and lots of vitamins and minerals. So that's why they're especially important to us. And then carbohydrates, so things like brown rice, whole grain bread, and cereals. They provide us with fiber, which is important for our digestive system. Also B vitamins and magnesium, and also fats, which got generally a very bad reputation. They actually include some very important vitamins as well. So I think a common misconception is when people are thinking about a healthy diet, they generally think, what do I need to cut out and which foods do I need to focus on? So again, quite commonly people think they need to eliminate fat and eat more fruits and vegetables. So while to an extent that's true, so there are foods that we need to eat more of, fruits and vegetables, others we should eat less of, so more specifically saturated fats, also sugars and salt. But rather than necessarily focusing on these individual food groups, it's better to sort of take more of a holistic view. So focusing on our diet as a whole and also adapting what we eat depending on how active we are. So a quick look at the government guidelines. So this is the Eat Well guide, which helps us to understand the types of foods that we should be eating and in what kind of volumes. So as I'm sure most of you will know, total calories per day are slightly different for men and women. So for men, the general recommendation is 2,500, and for women, slightly lower at 2,000 per day. I think very common knowledge that we should be eating roughly 5 portions of fruit and vegetables if we can. Starchy carbohydrates, they are the sort of largest sector on this Eat Well guide. So consisting of things like potatoes, bread, rice, pasta. So that should work out to roughly just over a third of what we eat. Within this food group, it's good to choose whole grain options because these contain more fiber, more vitamins and minerals as well. The next segment we've got there, so the blue section, this is dairy and alternatives. So this would have traditionally included milk, cheese, yogurt. I think a lot of us are moving away from traditional milk and towards other alternatives. So things like soya milk, rice milk, oat milk, and nut-based drinks. So they come into the same categories. And these are very good sources of protein and also calcium, which is very important for our bones and teeth. So next section, we've got our proteins. So this can include beans, pulses, fish, eggs, and meats. So beans and pulses in particular are quite good for us as they're low in fat but high in protein. They've got a lot of vitamins and minerals there as well. Those of us who are meat eaters, so sort of non-vegetarians, recommendation is we do try and eat 2 portions of fish if we can. And if one of those is more of an oily fish, so salmon, sardines, trout, that can be really good for us as they contain things like the omega oils, which are very good for our brains. So generally the recommendation is we try and eat a very limited amount of processed meat and red meats. So the guidelines suggest that no more than 70 grams per day if we can manage to avoid those. Oils and spreads as well, that very small purple section there. The body does need a good, a small amount of these. So unsaturated fats are best. So things like rapeseed oil, olive oil, sunflower oil. But fats are particularly high in energy, so high in calories. So generally keeping these to a fairly low intake can best support sort of weight control. So outside of the diagram, we've got things like crisps, chocolate, ice creams. So thinking about saturated fat, sugar, salt, these should be minimized as much as possible. So I think when we talk about food, we very commonly think about the physical impacts on our body. But something that's less talked about generally is the way that what we eat impacts our brain and our mental health. So I think when we talk about mental health, if finding ways of supporting our mental health, most prevalent topics will be, managing our stress levels, perhaps exercising, going to talking therapies, reducing alcohol intake, getting out in the sun, things like that. But what's really rarely talked about is food and what we eat and how that impacts our mind. So there's some very crucial links between what we eat and the impacts it can have on our brain. So it might sound obvious when we say it, but I think when I was preparing these slides, a little light bulb went off in my head. So our brains are always on. So unlike our muscles that, are more active when we move, whether we're awake, asleep, the brain is always functioning and doing a lot of work. So it takes control of our breathing, helps our obviously heart function, keep beating, all of our senses. And when we're asleep, we're dreaming. That's powered by the brain. When we're awake, we're thinking, we're moving. So the brain is always working hard for us. So because of that, it needs a constant supply of fuel. And that fuel comes from the food that we eat. So, and beyond this, what we eat actually affects the structure and function of the brain, and this can have an impact on our mood. So, the brain isn't very well equipped to sort of remove or reject poor quality foods. So, things like processed or refined foods, they can actually have a detrimental impact on our brain. So, diets high in sugar, they can be very harmful to the brain. They affect our insulin regulation and also promote inflammation within the brain. So high sugar diets are actually linked to impaired brain function and worsening of mood. That's because the inflammatory cells actually circulate within the brain and can contribute to brain tissue injury. So in terms of the link between nutrition and mental health, so this is quite closely related to the brain chemical serotonin. So this is one of the most common body chemicals that are talked about when we think about sort of our mood. So it's a neurotransmitter, mood regulator, so commonly associated with happiness. And the production of this is largely within the gut. So 95% of serotonin is produced in the gut, which is lined with lots of nerve cells. And the production of these is very heavily influenced by the bacteria that make up the intestinal microbiome. So you might have seen adverts on the TV about the drinkable yogurts. They talk about the encouraging the healthy bacteria in your gut. So just one way that food can impact on the production of serotonin. So studies have shown that more traditional diets, so Mediterranean diets, Japanese diets, which are very high in vegetables, these can actually reduce the risk of depression quite significantly because of the impact that they have on our moods. So obviously most relevant to what we do here at Hussle is fitness. So there's a big link between fitness and nutrition. So to exercise, again, we need fuel to power our workouts. So I think you'll hear a lot of fitness professionals quoting the 80-20 rule. So whatever our fitness goals, whether it's losing weight, building a stronger body, the proven theory is that roughly 80% of success is related to what we eat, and then 20% is related to the fitness activities that we participate in. So in terms of the fuel, carbohydrates generally provide us with energy. So that's a key fuel for both the brain and the muscles. Protein is also important. It helps us to store carbohydrates within our muscles. Also helps promote muscle repair after activity. And evidence suggests that thinking about nutrition and physical activity together has much better impacts on our well-being than focusing on one or the other. Generally, people who are more active will take a bit more of a conscious approach to what they eat, more likely to make informed, nutritious food choices. And good nutrition can also support the recovery of our muscles, so making us more successful within our fitness activities. So current sort of government guidelines for exercise are either 150 minutes, so 2.5 hours of moderate activity, or 75 minutes, so an hour and 15 minutes of high intensity activity per week. So for anyone who's engaging at those kind of levels, they can rely on those standard dietary requirements. So going back to that Eat Well guide, but those who are more active should consume additional carbohydrates. So looking at this table here, at the top, we've sort of got light, low intensity. So that would be that moderate exercise levels. So recommended intake there is around 3 to 5 grams of carbohydrate per kilo in body weight. But if we look at the higher end there, so high endurance programs, so people perhaps training for marathons and things like that, the carbohydrate daily intake is doubled in those situations. Going beyond that, so people with very high levels of activity, so over 4 hours a day, most likely professional athletes, if they're finding enough time to do that level of exercise, almost 2.5 to 3 times the standard intake for people in those situations. So thinking beyond carbohydrates, the other nutrients that are important to in relation to exercise are also proteins and fats. We also, of course, need to be conscious of how we hydrate ourselves. So common misconception is that protein on its own can help increase muscle mass. So um, we need to be active and performing the right kind of exercise to make sure that protein does go to the muscles. So just consuming protein in itself, that does increase calorie consumption. So if it's not directed to the muscles, it can actually lead to excess weight gain. So general population should be eating around 0.75 grams of protein per kilo of body weight. This is almost doubled for strength and endurance athletes looking to build muscle mass. So commonly, sort of strength and resistance trainers would be consuming protein, protein shakes, protein bars, that kind of thing after activity, which while beneficial, research says that it's best when it's actually combined with some carbohydrate consumption as well. So despite common misconceptions, fats are essential to the body in small amounts. So fats support cell function. So every cell in our body, the outer membrane, the outer layer is actually made of fats. Fats also help us absorb vitamins from the digestive system. They also protect our organs. So many body organs have a layer of fat around them to prevent them from being damaged. And fat also helps keep the body warm. So because fat is high in calories, as earlier mentioned, overconsumption can lead to weight gain because we're not necessarily burning all those calories off. But choosing unsaturated fats, so those healthier fats, olive oil, and those other kind of oils, they can be good for us because they help reduce blood cholesterol and also prevent inflammation in the body. So beyond fats and proteins, the other focus area when we're being active is hydration. So drinking enough fluid. So obviously when we're active, we sweat. That does vary depending on the intensity of the activity and also, how warm it is in the room, for example. So for those standard recommended exercise levels, water is generally recommended. But when we exercise for longer periods, so longer than an hour, that's when isotonic sports drinks, so your Lucozades and things like that, can be very beneficial because they contain additional carbohydrate to help keep us going for longer. So thinking about why it's good to fuel ourselves well for exercise and in relation to our workplaces. So being active has many positive benefits on the way we carry out our day-to-day lives, also within our working lives. So some of the numbers are quite significant here. So for those walking, walking outside, walking on a treadmill for 30 minutes a day, productivity increases as large as 30% have been observed amongst those participating. People who exercise are actually much better at dealing with stress, almost 46% better in some situations compared to workers who don't exercise. Exercise helps us perform better as well, so helps our brains to perform more effectively. So there have been 10 to 20% increases in cognitive function associated with just 20 minutes of exercise per day. And it's good to exercise within the working day as well as you can. So making use of lunch breaks. Some companies offer sort of gym memberships on site or fitness benefits to their staff. So if you can take a bit of time out of your working day to get some exercise in, that can have a really positive impact on performance as well. So performance increases as high as 21% have been observed amongst those taking breaks within the working day to be active. So a bit of audience engagement now. So we've got a quick nutrition and fitness fact or fiction quiz. So get your pens ready or feel free to use the chat function if you'd like to put your true or false answers into the chat. So we've got 5 questions, quick true or false. So be interested to see what we all know about nutrition and fitness. So the first question, you should avoid all fats if you're trying to lose weight. Do you think that is true or false? Okay, so that one is actually false. So as earlier mentioned, fat does provide essential nutrients. So even if we're trying to lose weight, it should be an important part of a healthy eating plan. So going back to that earlier point, because they have more calories, they do need to be limited to avoid putting on additional weight, or if you're trying to lose weight. So if trying to lose weight, it's good to consider some of the healthier fats such as avocados, olives, or nuts. So next up, we have I can eat more unhealthy foods because I exercise regularly. Do you think that's true or false? So that one's false. I think it's a misconception I had in my younger years. I thought because I was very active, didn't need to worry about what I ate. But although exercise does burn calories, it doesn't eliminate the damage that those unhealthier foods can do to us. So high salt and high saturated fat can be damaging to the body. And although exercise does burn calories, it doesn't counteract those damaging impacts of those foods. So third question, what do we think here? Muscle weighs more than fat. Do you think that's true or false? A little bit of a trick question there, depending on how you interpret it. So, muscle itself doesn't weigh more than fat, but it does weigh more by volume. So, muscle is a more compact, dense tissue. So, it tends to look more sculpted and toned than fat. So, it's possible to look and feel trimmer if you have more muscle compared to someone who has more body fat, even if the weight remains the same. Okay, so for anyone who attended our previous session, you might have a little bit of an advantage here. So always worth attending multiple webinars. So you need to eat protein straight after your workout to help build muscle. Do you think that's true or false? Okay, so that one's actually false. So a lot of gym goers think that they need to have their protein shake straight after their workout. But what's more important is the bigger picture. So how much protein is eaten over a 24-hour period. Okay, so final question. Cardiovascular activity is best when looking to lose weight. Do you think that is true or false? So partly true, but we've put false here because for the best results, it's good to combine a mixture of resistance training with cardiovascular activity. So weight training doesn't necessarily burn as much calories, but the more muscle you have, the more calories you can burn over a 24-hour period. Okay, so hopefully that was of interest to you all. Hopefully everyone's learned a little bit more about fitness and nutrition. So I'm very pleased to now welcome our guest speaker, Andrea, to take the stage to speak. So Andrea is practitioner of nutritional therapy and NLP at 3D Leisure. So 3D Leisure are one of Hussle's fitness partners. So they run a lot of leisure centres across the UK that Hussle members have access to. So this includes private health clubs and hotel leisure facilities. So Andrea is quite unique in that she works in the fields of both holistic nutrition and neuro-linguistic programming. So that's NLP. This combined skill set enables her to provide expert dietary advice while also offering professional nutritional counseling to change bad habits, erase limiting beliefs, and introduce powerful motivational strategies. So, welcome, Andrea. Um, very, very pleased to have you on the session today. So, perhaps firstly, would you like to tell us a little bit about your background experience and the kind of support that you offer to people?
Yes, so my background, I feel like I've always been involved. Got a bit of a background noise here. Don't know, there's an echo. Oh, that's better. Yeah. So yeah, I started in the gym at the age of 7. I was a gymnast. Ended up a national squad gymnast training for Great Britain for about 5 or 6 years. Grueling schedule of 24 hours a week, leaving the house at 7 in the morning, not getting home till 9:30 at night. Very exhausting mentally and physically. And by the time I reached adulthood, I'd sustained many injuries, and my mental health wasn't that good either, as a result of probably not eating properly, being under a hell of a lot of stress, and overtraining. This kind of led me into my career, really, which was I initially at university studied sports science and recreation management, and then I did a master's degree in exercise physiology and sports psychology. And my interest lifelong really has been about mental and physical well-being. And I discovered through initially NLP and then later nutrition how thinking the right way and eating the right way, not only does that impact on the physical health, but also has a huge impact on mental health. And it was with that kind of renewed knowledge, having trained in those two disciplines, that my sort of life work now has been working with people, trying to get them to understand more about their thought processes, but also their nutrition and how that can impact on their health, and to help them achieve what I like to call optimal health. Because there is a big difference between fitness and health. And I like people to achieve optimal health where they are functioning at their best, whatever that best is for that individual. So that's really what I do.
Okay, fantastic. Very impressive background from the sporting side of things, and I'm sure audience members can see how important nutrition may have been there, and perhaps didn't quite have the guidance that you needed at the time. So it's great that you've been able to build on that and obviously help support people. So who do you generally support? Do you support other sort of athletes, or do you support sort of the general population as well? Who do you typically work with?
I would say mainly the general population. I work with anyone really. I tend to, I also work with a local gym where I support all the gym members as well. And then I do sometimes do work with corporates. But I find most of my work, the most impactful is one-to-one work. I do some group sessions with individuals, but because nutrition and NLP itself it's very unique and individual. And if you want to get results, then working with people on a one-to-one basis is the most powerful, really.
Okay, and I guess interested to hear from your side, sort of building on some of the topics we talked about earlier, thinking about sort of our mental well-being. How do you think how would you describe the relationship between what we eat and sort of how we feel mentally?
Well, for me, it's the link between the gut-brain axis, which was my discovery, I'd say, about 10 years ago. And the whole microbiome and gut health thing is quite new science. It's only been around since around the break of the century in 2000 that the research really started. And what we have discovered is that there is a very, very fast link between the gut and the brain. And we all know this because when you feel anxious about something, you feel it in your stomach. It almost happens instantaneously. And there's this super fast highway between the gut and the brain via the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is the wandering nerve. It's Latin for wandering. And it basically is the nerve that goes throughout the whole body to our major organs, how they all communicate with each other. We used to always think it was kind of the brain that was communicating with the organs. But now we're aware that actually it's the gut really that communicates with the organs as well. And they do call the gut our second brain, but I actually like to call it our first brain, because I feel that I know through our evolution that we were guts before we were brains. So we were floating digestive systems, and then the appendages came later. So the gut houses a lot more intelligence than the brain itself. And we now know that for every neuron that travels from the brain to the gut, there are 7 going from the gut to the brain. So it's actually the gut that's telling the brain what to do and not the other way around. And not only have they discovered the gut-brain axis, but they've now discovered the gut-lung axis and the gut-heart axis. So I get people with heart issues that come to me that have irregular heartbeats or racing heartbeats. And once they heal their gut, the heart issues all settle down. So there is this big link between the power of the gut and the health of the whole body. And the gut-brain axis is such a powerful one. And I find that by healing people's gut, you can have a massive impact on their anxiety, their depression, their level of fatigue. All of that is impacted by the gut. And the gut itself houses a very, very large nervous system. It's the largest nervous system outside of the brain and the spinal cord. It's much bigger than any other peripheral nervous system. So the gut itself, which stretches from mouth to anus, though you won't think that's a very long distance, but if you spread it flat, it's the size of a badminton court. So it's a massive surface area. And there's obviously lots of nerves that run through that surface area, and hence why it has such a huge nervous system. And it's the power of this nervous system and the production of neurotransmitters, as you mentioned earlier, Matt, in your talk about serotonin is just one of them, but there are many other neurotransmitters that have an impact on our mental health. We're all kind of aware of serotonin because that's kind of what's picked up in antidepressants like these SSRIs that people take. That's because of trying to manipulate the level of serotonin in the body. But 95% of our serotonin is made in our gut. So if our gut is unhealthy, then these neurotransmitters aren't going to be working effectively in the brain. So just healing the gut does have that huge impact on mental health. The other systems that are really important that's worth mentioning now is because of this large surface area of the gut, there's another system that it impacts, which is our immune system. So 80% of our immune cells line our gut. So if our gut is unhealthy, then our immune system is on high alert. And that means that these inflammatory molecules can be passed from the gut into the bloodstream and can travel around the body. And they can travel anywhere, including the brain. So they can travel into our joints, make us feel stiff and achy. They can travel into our brain and have an impact on the inflammation of our brain as well. So the gut has an impact on the immune system, which also affects our mental health and our physical health. And the other system that it impacts is our endocrine system. So our gut houses the largest endocrine organ in the body. So our endocrine system, which houses all our endocrine glands, which is responsible for production of our hormones, which are like chemical messengers, very similar to neurotransmitters. And if the gut is unhealthy, then obviously these hormones won't be produced properly. And that, again, is going to have a huge impact on our physical and mental health. So that's really the link just between the gut itself and the health of the gut and how that then links to mental and physical wellness in the body.
Well, so I think the expression "follow your gut instinct" has got a lot more to it than people might perhaps have thought. You know, people have recognised for a long time that there's sort of feelings in your gut, and there's obviously a lot of science behind that. So that's quite fascinating. I think one area you mentioned was the microbiome, and I think I touched on that earlier. But could you tell our audience a little bit more about what that means?
Yeah. So the microbiome is a set of microbes, or a big group of microbes, an ecosystem of microbes that actually are housed within our body and over our body. So we have a microbiome of our skin, but we also have a microbiome in our eyes, in our mouth, in our ears. There are microbes everywhere. But the largest microbiome of our body is actually housed in our gut, and it's supposed to reside in our large intestine. So our stomach and our small intestine should be relatively sterile, and our large intestine is which houses our microbiome. And these microbes, things like bacteria, fungi, viruses, parasites, they all live in a synergistic relationship with us, symbiotic relationships. They're there to support us. They're there to help us. They first were introduced to our body at birth. So when we were born, if we were born vaginally, we'd have got the microbiome from our mother. And her microbiome also came from her mother. And her microbiome came from her mother. So the microbiome that's housed within us comes from our mother's mother, mother's mother's mother, etc., all the way through our ancestry. So we have our genetic makeup, but we also have our microbiome makeup. And for me, I believe that the microbiome itself is more powerful than the genetics, because in relationship of how many microbes we have in relation to human cells, the ratio is 10:1. So we have 10 times more microbes in our body than we have human cells. There's a very good book written by Alana Cohen called 10% Human. And it talks about the fact that we are only 10% human cells and we are 90% microbes. And these microbes house all the intelligence and pass through the generations. Their job initially when we are born is to teach our immune system what is friend and what is foe. Because obviously when we're born, we have a very immature immune system that needs to be taught. And it is taught through our gut, through the microbes in our gut, which houses 80% of the immune cells. The microbiome starts educating the gut and the immune system as to what is friend and what is foe. So that's kind of the first job of the microbes. But the microbes themselves, it's interesting through the nervous system, the enteric nervous system of the gut. We always thought initially it was the nervous system that was communicating to the brain. From the gut, but we now have discovered that the microbes themselves can communicate directly to the brain via the vagus nerve. So these microbes house a huge intelligence and are very, very powerful. And our job is to look after them and protect them. I don't believe there's any such thing as a bad microbe or a bad bacteria or a bad virus. They all live in a relationship and an ecosystem together. They only become bad when one grows more out of control than the others. And the job is having a nice variety down there so that they can all keep each other in check. They're kind of like all in a little battle with each other. And the job is to keep that balance and keep that homeostasis. So our job is to feed these microbes. We can feed them by taking probiotics that you mentioned earlier. But more than anything, it's having a nice high fiber in our diet. So a good amount of fiber, good fibrous vegetables and fruits that the prebiotics, which actually feed these microbes. And when they feast on that fiber, they produce some wonderful chemicals, fatty acids in particular, that really, really help with our health. So that's really the story of the microbiome and how it impacts on our health.
Okay, quite fascinating. I'm not sure how I feel about it being only 10% human. That's quite an interesting thing to think about. But so I guess building on this science, how do you work with people to encourage them to eat the right foods? And is there anything that you build on from sort of what I talked about earlier in terms of what you would recommend to people to sort of improve their diets to help them feel better, physically, mentally? What would you typically recommend?
Yeah. Well, with every new client, generally I put them straight onto what I call my 28-day program to optimal health. And it's just teaching them the basics of nutrition, because a lot of people don't know the basics. And the reason why it's 28 days is something like nutrition is very difficult to impact and change in someone's life, because it's not just, oh, let's just change what I eat. It's changing how you plan, it's changing how you shop, it's changing how you cook. It's a huge task for people, and it can be incredibly overwhelming. So I kind of hold their hand every day for 28 days to help them work through this minefield, which is sometimes very confusing to people, to make it very simple and straightforward as to what they need to do to improve their health. And though there are many things within those 28 days, the main message are three main things. The first one is reducing the carbs initially in their diet. And the reason why I suggest this is because we live in a very carbohydrate rich world, and a lot of our processed food is very carbohydrate dense. And the problem with having carbohydrates all the time is we're constantly putting glucose into the gut. and we're putting glucose into our bloodstream. And that has two massive effects on the body. Number one, if we're eating a lot of carbohydrates, be that complex carbohydrate like whole grain rice, and particularly if it's sugar or some sugary foods, it still gets broken down into glucose in the gut. And too much glucose is very toxic. And what happens is these microbes that should be residing in our colon will migrate into our upper gut, into our small intestine, where they should not be. And when they're there, they feast on glucose. And as a result, they produce a lot of horrible byproducts. And this is where people feel bloated and just have stomach cramps, and it also makes you feel incredibly fatigued. But that is what's called an upper fermenting gut, which we shouldn't have, and i.e. the microbes are fermenting on the sugar in the gut. It also is linked very much to our cravings. So if we have an upper fermenting gut and we have microbes feasting on the sugar, what the microbes are doing is they communicate to the brain via the gut-brain axis, feed me more. So this is why as soon as we have a bit of chocolate, we want to have the rest of the chocolate, or we have one chocolate hobnob and we want to have 5 chocolate hobnobs. It's because as soon as we wake up these microbes, they communicate to the brain, give me more, and hence the cravings begin. And what we need to do is to stop these cravings, and also to stop this upper fermenting gut, which is causing toxic load in the body, is to take the carbohydrate load right down. So that's the first thing I get them to do, is to reduce their carbohydrates. The other thing that this also does is it gets control of the blood sugar levels. So what we find is when we're having too much carbohydrates, we're constantly getting glucose going into the bloodstream. As a result of that, the body knows, or the brain knows, that a high level of glucose is toxic in the blood. So the pancreas is instructed to produce insulin, the hormone insulin, to shuttle glucose out of the blood. It then gets shuttled out, and it's either used immediately for energy, but if we have an overload of it, it gets stored as glycogen in the muscle and the liver for immediate energy. And if those stores are overloaded, it then gets laid down as fat. So the problem that we have with insulin and this constant influx of insulin into our body is it switches off fat burning and lays down fat. So if anybody wants to lose any weight, or they're struggling with diabetes, as an example, then having too much carbohydrate is very detrimental to their health. Once you've removed, or not removed, but reduced your carbohydrate load, and you've burnt off the stores of glycogen in your body is then forced to look for another source of energy. And the other source of energy is from fat. Now, we have plenty of fat in our body to keep us going. Even on a lean athlete, there's around 140,000 calories there, whereas we can only actually store about 1,700 calories of glucose at any one time. So we have a huge amount of fat storage in our body that we can use. And what happens is this fat store, which is either stored under our skin subcutaneously or dangerously around our organs as visceral fat, this gets mobilized into ketones. Ketones is soluble, because obviously we wouldn't want to have fat passing around in our bloodstream because it would cause a lot of problems. So it gets mobilized into ketones. These ketones are soluble, they get into the bloodstream, then they can pass around the body, and they can be used for energy production instead of using glucose. Once your body is able to do that, you become something called metabolically flexible, which means you're able to either burn glucose as an energy source or ketones as an energy source. Now, this becomes super healthy for the brain. The brain itself is 60% fat, around 60% fat. It needs fat for energy. It loves ketones. What I find is once people start burning ketones for fuel, their brain health improves tremendously. They suddenly, almost like a light bulb moment, have mental clarity again. And they feel that they can just remember things that they'd forgotten. And they just feel they have that space in their brain, that feeling of overwhelm that they had before suddenly disappears, because their brain is being fueled by fat instead of being fueled by carbohydrate. But it's not forever. So I wouldn't say to reduce that load right down low forever, because glucose is important. We do need to have carbohydrates in our diet. But for me, it's cyclical. So I think we have far too many carbohydrates, and that's what leads to metabolic syndrome, which is this blood sugar level going up, insulin going up, blood sugar level going down, insulin going down, feeling hungry, getting cravings, blood sugar level going up and down the whole day long. Our blood sugar level is going up and down. This is metabolic syndrome, which leads to diabetes, obesity, and heart disease. And we want to get that under control. So what happens here is the blood sugar level will even out and we start burning ketones. But the body does need a level of glucose. So what I suggest, and it also depends on the age of the individual, the sex of the individual, the level of activity of the individual as to how much carbohydrate they have in their daily life. Because you want to at some point be burning ketones, and then you want to be burning glucose, and you want to be able to switch between the two. And your body very easily does this. If you think of how we evolved, we probably spent a lot of our time fasting. You know, we weren't eating 3 meals a day without doubt. We were burning ketones a lot of the time, and then we would have the odd bit of glucose. Then we would be burning ketones a lot of the time, and then we would be having glucose. So I try and mimic that for my clients and try and get them to be able to burn both ketones and glucose. So, and that's where it becomes unique, because you work individually depending on the level of activity of that individual and the age and the sex as to how much carbohydrates they need in relation to fats in their diet.
Wow, it's amazing. Yeah, I've only ever really thought about, what we eat in more simple terms, but the relationship's obviously much more complex than we might have thought. So, a little bit conscious of time. So I think sort of final question would be to you. So sort of the focus of what we do at Hussle here is supporting companies to help their employees in getting active. So for the sort of the benefits of physical activity. So what would you recommend from a nutritional perspective to individuals who are looking to benefit from fitness? How can they best fuel themselves to succeed?
Well, I think if you're working in HR or working with individuals, unless you have that knowledge of nutrition, it's very difficult to give advice. My advice for people in that role would be whole foods, get people off processed foods and just recommend that they're eating whole foods. Cooking foods from scratch so you know what's in it. If you are picking up something off the shelf, reading the ingredients to make sure you understand what's in it, because a lot of these ingredients you can't even pronounce. If you can't pronounce it, you shouldn't be eating it. If you don't know what it is, you shouldn't be eating it. So trying to get the people to understand about how important it is to eat natural whole foods. And the other thing I would say is that, if you've got any physical or mental issues, sometimes a good starting point is nutrition. We tend to reach out to the medical system, maybe, oh, I've got anxiety, so therefore I need to, go and get some medication, or maybe have some counselling, or I've got depression, so I need medication or counselling, or I got fatigue. But possibly looking at nutrition is a good starting point, because, I do know that if you have physical or mental issues, then nutrition can sometimes iron those all out. It can normally iron it all out without having to go down the medical route. Sorry, someone's just come to my door and my dog's off. So yes, I would just recommend that people look at nutrition and see it as something that they can possibly work with to help themselves before looking at other things.
All right, excellent advice. So thank you so much, Andrea, for coming to speak with us today. I'm sure you've got a lot more advice that people might be interested in hearing. So after the session, we will be sharing Andrea's details. So Andrea works both for 3D Leisure, but she also has her own consultancy supporting individuals and also companies who are looking for support with nutrition. So we'll be sharing Andrea's contact details. So if anyone would like to find out more, then you'll have the opportunity to do so. So sort of the final area of today's session, I'd like to introduce my colleague Lawrence. So Lawrence is our Director of Partnerships here at Hussle. So he's worked with us since 2019, first joining as Head of Commercial Partnerships and since progressing to his director level role. So using his experience spanning over a decade working in the loyalty and partnership space, Lawrence has an expert insight into how brands can use rewards and incentives to influence a positive change in consumer and employee behaviour. So over to you, Lawrence.
Thank you, Matt. Much appreciated. So look, having heard about the benefits of good nutrition, I'm now going to talk about how Hussle helps employees get more active, as obviously good nutrition and fitness go hand in hand. So how does the Hussle fitness benefit work? Looking back a few years pre-COVID, most gym benefits were set up by simply visiting your nearby gym nearby your head office, where staff would be based 5 days a week, and negotiating a small corporate discount with them directly, maybe 10, 20% off a 12-month membership. But in this day and age, what if near work location is not convenient? What if you're working from home or hybrid? Or what if you're out at the weekend and looking to work out then as opposed to on a weekday? What if the price is not right? What if the gym is too expensive or not premium enough for you or not flexible enough? Or what if the facilities are not what the employee needs? What if they're after pool access as opposed to a standard budget gym? These are all barriers for employees in signing up for a traditional gym benefit. And as a result, the average engagement rates you see are around 5% of the workforce. So how does Hussle improve on this? First off, with greater coverage, and it's only by working with a network of venues like Hussle that you can provide your staff with access to thousands of venues wherever they may be. Hussle has coverage in 94% of all UK postcodes, meaning that even fully remote workers in rural areas will be able to have a venue within reach. The Hussle network includes some of the best fitness brands in the country, from council-run leisure centres through to well-known premium health clubs like Nuffield Health. This means that there are a range of price points to suit all budgets, from your most junior staff to your board members, making this a highly inclusive benefit. It also means that those employees that work out frequently can access a variety of facilities, keeping their workouts fresh and themselves motivated. Price point is one of the main reasons cited for them not signing up for the gym. However, the Hussle benefit provides a huge 70% off monthly pricing on any one of our passes, meaning that the average employee gets all of this for just £10. One of the key USPs of Hussle is the flexibility that our passes provide. All our passes are month-by-month subscriptions with no long-term contracts. There are no joining fees, no intimidating inductions, and multi-gym access, allowing employees to access multiple gyms, pools and spas on the one pass. This flexibility helps not just drive greater participation rates by removing all barriers or pain points that employees might face when making the decision to sign up, but also increasing the amount of exercise they do when they actually sign up. All of these factors mean that through using Hussle fitness benefits, you can increase participation rates from your employees to up to 40%, depending on the size of your business. All of our fitness venues can be accessed on one simple digital pass from Hussle. At this point, I was going to show a quick demo, but I'm very conscious of time. So I think if anyone is interested in actually seeing how the platform works, please let us know after this session, and I'll be happy to jump on a one-on-one call and show you how the platform actually works, both for you and your employees. As you can see, we're already successfully working with some amazing brands, and we'd love to provide Hussle as a benefit for your staff too. If you would like to offer the benefit to your team, please let us know after this webinar and we can provide you with a quote. Pricing is incredibly competitive, as we've not over-engineered the product and instead focused on providing employees with what they want, which is fitness venues at the best possible price. In fact, once the benefit is up and running, you are successfully improving employee fitness, reducing absenteeism, and increasing productivity, the average fitness program delivers an ROI of £3 back for every £1 spent on it. And once signed up, we'll simply book you in for a launch call so you can agree a launch plan, timings, and employee eligibility. after which we will set up the landing page, marketing assets, and access to a HR portal so that you can go live. That's all from me, Matt.
Thank you so much, Lawrence. So, as Lawrence says, we'll be in touch sharing details as to how you can inquire further if you're interested in offering fitness as a benefit to your employees. So, just a quick note that our next session has been scheduled. So, our May webinar, we've booked it in. So, in this session, we'll be welcoming along Andy's Man Club, so a wonderful mental health charity. And in this session, we'll be looking at how fitness and sort of talking and peer support groups can be a valuable tool for organisations when they're looking to support the mental well-being of their staff, in particular those who might be going through some particular present struggles. So there's a QR code there that will be included in our post-webinar micro website. I'll also send a link in a follow-up email later today. So that does conclude the session for today. So thank you so much to everyone who has attended for your attendance, for your engagement. Really means a lot. And we will be staying on the call just for a few minutes for a quick Q&A. But otherwise, that concludes the session. Thank you so much for coming along. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Lawrence, for your time as well. And we hope to see you again very soon.